This is the house of inspiration, praise, and worship. Zoe Live Radio, the abundant life experience.
Good evening and welcome to Literature in 60 Minutes. I'm Zandile, Pooe, your host, and it is still Youth Month. We are still talking subjects that pertain to the youth and challenges that the youth are facing. And today we have as our guest author, Nano Mutibi. She is the author of Not Great, But Alive. And today we are going to be discussing a very sensitive topic, but a very under-discussed topic, especially because it plagues young people so much, especially young women. And I want to highlight this issue, and I want us to possibly have an offline discussion about it with Facebook comments as well as other input that you might have pertaining to the subject, which is the central theme of her book. So I'm looking forward to that interview, and that will be coming up right after the break.
Zoe Live Radio, the abundant life experience. This is the house of inspiration, praise, and worship. Zoe Live Radio, the abundant life experience.
Welcome back. And like I mentioned earlier, we are talking to Nano Mutibi. She is author of Not Great, But Alive. And I would love to welcome you, Nano. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, everybody. So great to be here on this lovely winter afternoon.
Yes.
In Joburg.
Yes. Thank you so much for allowing me the privilege of chatting to you. You released your book earlier this year, and I have had the privilege of both meeting you as well as reading your book, and I'm looking forward to us unpacking your characters, unpacking your thought process behind the book. But you can first just tell us what inspired the title of the book. It's
the reality of South Africa. So I mean, if somebody who's super conscious. Other people call it an overthinking. Other people call it spiritually sensitive. I'm just somebody who's always got her mind a little bit above the clouds, a little bit above, I'm always looking at life from a bird's eye view, everything that's happening. I'm looking at it from a bird's eye view, and I'm always trying to get a sense of what's happening, not only in my life, but to also understand what's happening in my life in the context of what's happening, in the society that I'm in and in the world. And what I found is that in South Africa in particular, we are a nation now that is really at the brink of a psychological tipping point, in the sense that there was a time when we were a country so full of possibilities, so full of hopes and all, wonderful things that we could imagine. And nation building was a project. There was DE, there was women empowerment, there was equity, there was youth empowerment. And, we all know the euphoria that we went through when we entered into democracy. And that was shortly followed by, a season of really the creation of the Black middle class.
Yes.
Lots and lots of successes, lots and lots of high flyers. And that quickly became, the consumerism, the consumerism, the spat of consumerism that we saw come through. And but over and above that, that's just at a shallow level. At a deeper level, we became also, that was a society where the shallow could splash their shallowness, but also the deeper people who feel things at a much more intense level, could also have hopes. And that's where a lot of people had serious hopes for greatness, and I say we grew up in an age where everybody wanted to be the first something, the first woman to be this, the first Black person to be this. And so we all, we were born in a season, the Bornfrees, we were born with an inherent desire and belief of greatness, you know. And for the past 20 years, everybody that I've been surrounded with and everybody that I know in my life has this inherent belief and faith that they're destined for greatness. But we are now almost over 25 years into a democracy, and it's very clear that there's a very limited number of people that are going to reach this greatness, because whereas before the scales were tipped against us by apartheid, we are now, the scales are tipped against us by corruption, nepotism, favoritism, and all other decays that have just, you know, attacked our beautiful country. So there's a lot of dreams that have been shattered. All those inherent greatnesses that so many of us felt, there's a, you know, is slowly being chipped away, you know, and a lot of us are slowly having such rude awakening about the realities of success, the reality of this country, that actually we're no longer the country of Mandela. We're no longer the country of possibilities. We're a country now of depression, of anxiety, of failures, of really being robbed of so many things, and so a lot of people are feeling robbed of their greatness. And I wrote this book really as a tribute to those who feel robbed of their greatness by the turn of events in our country, in our world, and to say to them that, look, as long as you're alive, that's what matters, and as long as you're alive, you still have an opportunity to turn things around and to live your greatness, maybe not in the way that you expected that you were going to live it out, but perhaps in an even greater way than we think. And so I've gone into a deep analysis and a deep trying to understand what actually is greatness, what defines greatness, and understanding, you know, just dissecting it to its lowest point, to say, honestly, our mothers, our fathers, those were the great people. You know, we grew up in an era of icons, you know, the Nelson Mandelas, the Tokyos, the Cyrils, you know, and that is what we understood to be greatness. But my book, it's about understanding greatness at a much, much deeper and perhaps an even simpler level, to say that as long as you're alive, and as long as you have a dream, and as long as you still believe that you can achieve that dream, you are great. You qualify for greatness.
Sure. Wow. Hey, the background of it. Exactly. Not even a mouthful, but all of the points that you are talking about are very relevant, especially in our context in South Africa. You know. We are a nation that had much promise, that held, you know, the Rainbow Nation a concept and everything that was expected of us. You know, we've delivered on some of those things, but unfortunately, for the most part, a lot of those things are yet to be realized, and some of them have fallen by the wayside. But now you start off with a very jolting, you know, statistic. You are talking about the rate of abortion in our country, right? And Mpumi, your central character, has
Mbali.
Mbali, your central character.
Yeah, it could have been Mpumi. It could have been anybody.
Exactly. You know, your central character.
Could have been Zandile.
It could have been Zandile, very much so, you know. But I love the relatability of her story. She has gone through, first of all, the setting is in the early 80s for the beginning part, at least, of the book, of how her life started. I think I'd like you, because this is your creation, to tell us why Mbali. Who is Mbali?
Okay, so Mbali, it's still looking at this our scenario at a macro level. You know. One of the things that I've really tried to understand, I don't want to be too quick to call it a failure of our national project, of our democracy. I wouldn't want to call it a failure as yet, but let me say the defect, perhaps. You know, I had to understand, how did we get here, you know? The biggest thing that I picked up could have, I had to understand that through a single individual life, because, you know, you can look at things at a micro level, but also you have to understand how that interprets to an individual level, because when we look at the, you know, teenage pregnancy statistics, they're shocking. It could be thousands a day, but we have to be able to break down those thousands into every single girl. We have to be able, for us to fix teenage, you know, to get to the root of this problem, we have to understand what happens in every single girl's mind and experience to get themselves into the situation that they're at. So Mbali, like every other Bornfree, is born and with greatness, inherent greatness. Instinctively, she knows it inside of herself, like all of us. That, you know what, I know that there's more to my life. She may not be able to put a finger to it. She might have a sense of, you know, what it entails. Because remember, you know, the time that we were born in, it forced us to be a purpose-driven, person, you know, so everybody, you know, was in tune with their purpose because of the atmosphere, because of the environment. Everybody felt like, okay, whatever my purpose is, I'm gonna achieve it, right? So then now, what happens between you know, that child, the Bornfree, from the time that they are born to the time when they become conscious and they have dreams and they have hopes, to a point where they're an extreme opposite of what they ever dreamt of themselves to be. You know, it's so easy to look at a person's life and say, oh gosh, we don't know what happened to her. You know, we don't know what happened to him. This boy used to be so brilliant. Now he's a nyaupe boy. You know, this man, he used to be so rich. Now he's lost everything. He's a hobo. And actually, you know, Umbali is just a female version of any other person that I am passionate about in this context, which is, you know, an addicted young man, a street child, a street kid, you know, a man who's left his family. When I was writing the book, I mean, some of the psyches that I was very disturbed about would be like literally people who have left their families. A man who, you know, you'd see somebody, you know, eating off a bin, and you'll meet literally somebody who'll tell you that that's actually my father. You know, we used to live in a house. We had a normal house, we had a normal home, and we don't know what happened. He just will not come home. He refuses to come home. So I've always been interested in the psyche, at you know, on the tipping point, that what causes a person to flip. What causes a human being to flip? Because I believe that, you know, as Africans especially, we are a very God-fearing people. We are. And we're a very cultural and traditionally driven people. So we revere, you know, and we are good people. We are inherently good people, very hardworking people, contrary to, you know, to belief. What is it that causes us to break? Because it seems like we're getting more and more people who are breaking, and our breaking manifests in different ways. It can manifest as teenage pregnancy in a young girl's life, or it can, you know, manifest as drug addiction in a young boy's life, or a family, you know, breaking to pieces in a man and a woman's life. So what I found with Mbali, unfortunately, the discovery for me, it was so shocking that it's not actually what the government has not done for us. It's not what our state has done for us that has led us, that is driving the key, you know, aspects behind the psychological crisis that we're facing as a people. It's actually what it has done. It's the freedom that it has given us, the freedom that it has enabled us. That's okay, profound. So I want to take a step back. I'll expand on that, but in order to expand on that, I need to take a step back and say, You then go back to apartheid and you say apartheid, it was a project, right? It wasn't just an economic project. It was also a social project.
Definitely.
So one of the things that I like to say is that the TRC it attempted to deal with the political impact of apartheid, and BEE and empowerment, it attempted to deal with the economic impact of apartheid. However, we have not even begun to deal with the psychological impact of apartheid. And what is that psychological impact? The biggest, greatest impact of apartheid on South Africans, on the African South African, is the impact of the destruction of the African family.
Yes.
Definitely. So what it did with the migration laws, when it separated, when it took the fathers and took them to work in the mines, put them up in the hostels and said the women can't come into the city unless they have a pass, when they shoved them into hostel and made them live amongst men, amongst themselves, and in unbearable conditions, and
yes.
it, made sure that there was the urban decay that was taking place around them, forcing our men to have two families, because naturally a situation like that, where you have a law that says that your man has to work hundreds and thousands of kilometers away from home, and you as a woman can never visit him.
It becomes a natural consequence.
To end up having another family.
Yes, it becomes a natural consequence.
And likewise, even with the women, it's not just with the men. Even with the women who were left behind in the villages, they ended up also having other families, right? Having other partners, right? But all of this was kept secret, because so you'll have a main family and sub-family, multiple nuclear families. So that literally destroyed our family structure. Mostly also it created an inherent antagonism between our genders, right?
Yes.
And so what then happens is that you coming into a place where now there's freedom, there's liberation. Now all of this dirt that has been that has been kept under wraps, right? That the father had a woman in town and the mother had an uncle back home. That is, it now comes back in a form of utatako. It now comes back in a form of slay queens. It now comes back in a form of cheating. It now comes back in a form of stingy men's association and all these things, because now there's a mistrust between our genders, right? There's a mistrust between the African genders. But what we fail to realize is that was deliberately designed. When we look at gender-based violence, that was deliberately designed, because what that happened when apartheid was then lifted, where the African man has been disempowered for all these years. And then finally, when that veil of disempowerment is lifted, what you then do, you empower the women, you pump up the women, you pump up the young people.
Wow.
And you not only pump them up financially, you also pump them up with the freedom, the toxic freedom. And that is where I'm coming from with Mbali's psyche, that the Bornfrees were people who were born into an era of the toxic freedom. Okay, so that freedom says your mother, your father can't tell you anything. In fact, we're gonna make you the breadwinner. So we're gonna make the young person a breadwinner. I mean, how many of us young people at very young ages began to become breadwinners in our families?
That's
and as
true.
much as that was a good thing that we provided for our families, but it also came with a sense of emasculation to our fathers. So you empower the child in the house, you empower the mother. So now suddenly the mother, who you used to leave and go to Joburg, and she knew that you had another woman. So now she has work, now she can assert herself. So that's a double emasculation, right? And then you give them all the rights. You give the children all the rights. You can't corporally discipline your child. And then you, the same government, you then take it upon yourself to start liberating the young people sexually. You start saying to them, have as much sex as you want, as long as you condomize.
Sure.
Live, All these freedoms, then there's a nightlife, there's a glam life, there's consumerism. We're getting credit cards, we're being approached by the credit system, we're getting calls from people offering us debts and offering us a 10-minute loan. And so before you know it, young people are having cars, they're living in townhouses, but they have no sense of groundedness. They have no sense of the cost of that freedom
as well. Yeah, the good stewardship is lacking. Yeah.
And so Mbali is a girl who's really, unfortunately, a product of the toxic freedoms of post-apartheid democracy, where we have a psychological issue in the country that is not being dealt with. And unfortunately, the only thing that we know is really our rights. That's what we're conscious of, our generation. But we don't know how to handle those rights responsibly. And there's a lack of a family structure. So I don't know if I can continue.
Yes, you can.
If you want to intervene.
Definitely,
okay.
You can.
So where this goes, if you look at the story of Mbali, so you see that Mbali, the main thing in her life, like I said, she's got an inherent, sense of greatness. And as she grows, she finds herself in a situation where that greatness is stripped, from being an innocent, young, born-again, feisty young child
on fire
who
for God,
praises the Lord, even does deliverance at school, to being a 16-year-old that is lying at Hillbrow Hospital to have her first abortion.
Yes.
And what that then does immediately, again, is the same thing that happened to our fathers, but in an opposite way, is that so with men it's emasculation, with us again it's a dehumanization, because the moment you stop believing in yourself, if the moment something takes away from you the belief in being the best that you think you are, and anything that makes you think you're less of, then you've started to decay. Your soul has started to chip off.
That's
right?
True.
And you will look at this at an individual level. How do you fix that individually? How do you fix that spiritually? How do you fix that psychologically? But also at a micro level, we have to realize, again, back to the apartheid project, to say that the reason why the Afrikaners made sure that they break down the African family structure is because they knew that the family is a pillar of any society, right? So you go to the township now, how did they break our family? You go to a township, you find a two-roomed house where there's 8 or 6 or 10 members of the family, right? Where the men, the boys in the home, some of them sleep in the kitchen, some of them sleep in the lounge, right?
Yes.
And then what happens is that there's no infrastructure, there's no electricity in most of these areas. There's no stoves. There's a 2-plate stove. So the mother wakes up at 4 a.m. and maybe they don't have a geyser. She has to put water on the stove. Now you are sleeping in the kitchen as a man. At that time, the moment the day begins at 4 o'clock, at 5 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, before our parents go to catch the bus, you must be up. Not only can you be up like our kids today who wake up and they sit on the couch and they watch TV all day, our fathers, when they woke up, they had to immediately when they wake up, you pack your blankets and you get out of the house. You go to the tap, you watch, and you go to the street. That's where you must be, because there's no space in the house.
Yeah. So true.
So we become surprised if you go to the township every day from 5 o'clock. During the day, the streets are quiet. From 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 throughout the night, the streets are packed with young people. They do not have spaces in their own homes. And that is what the first thing that apartheid sought to do. So you separate the children from their parents. So the children, they find solace in the streets. So they will be with their peers, and the parents are happy at home because then they don't have to fight for space. They don't have to fight for one TV channel. Then they only come back when they sleep. So you just get your blanket in your little space and you sleep. Fast forward 25 years later, our generation, we grow up with, we married to husbands who, on a weekend, you are sitting there as a woman thinking, oh, we're going to cuddle up because it's a Saturday. No, what does he do? He wakes up, he jumps out of bed, off to the car wash, right? So you're wondering, what's wrong with this guy? Like, it's a Saturday. Can he never chill? Can't we watch a movie? Can't we relax? No, the guy grew up sleeping under the table.
Sure.
And he was programmed that the first thing he does when he wakes up is get out of the house.
Yeah.
So the culture that you're introducing, it's completely out. You cannot teach an old dog new tricks. He never learned to be comfortable. He never had pajamas. He never had slippers.
Yeah,
he can
true.
bath with cold water. I mean, I run a guest house. I can always tell the guys that grew up that way, because sometimes the geysers don't work, and you'll just see a guy outside. You're like, oh, but I didn't realize your geyser doesn't work. How did you wash? He's like, I washed with cold water. It's those guys, the guys that can bath in winter with cold water. And so we then, 25 years later, how that is manifesting, we're having young men who cannot stay in their homes, who are not comfortable in a home space. In the four walls. They feel claustrophobic. They have to be out there, be with Majida, drink beer, eat meat, because that's what their fathers did. And so those are the best of them, actually, because they're still present,
Yeah, I was about to say.
Never mind the fact that we're talking about a fatherless generation, So this is a completely fatherless generation because of the migration laws. And then the best of them, they're home, they're married, they've got their kids or they're supporting their children, but they have no sense of intimacy. They have no sense of space. They have no sense of
They're not emotionally,
romance,
they're not
even,
emotionally
and
available for that kind of thing, because they haven't been trained up
Exactly.
in a way that allows them to be present, but also not just physically, but emotionally as well, how to be accessible in that sense, because that is a context that they can't tap into because they haven't experienced it in and of themselves. So it's hard for them to give something that they themselves have never gotten. So that I perfectly understand, and I've also witnessed it in different environments. But now what I want us to talk about, you have so many themes running in your book. And one of them is violence and violence in our relationships in between the men and the women in the story. For instance, you have Vicky, who is Mbali's mother, and she experiences abuse in her relationships. From when Mbali is still very young until she's much older, and she is exposed to it, but also becomes a victim of it. So I'd like you to also talk about that, because we are in the era of very grievous gender-based violence. And I think this issue is now surfacing, and it's becoming bad in the media and everywhere else. But it's always been there, and we've always seen it or experienced it, depending on where you come from. But now it is becoming very bad because the media is publicizing it more and more. But tell me about what led you to write about Vicky and the different abusive relationships that she had.
Yes, it's still, right from the same thing, the same, a branch from the same tree, which is that gender-based violence it was a built-in feature of apartheid, right, into our society, when it created the animosity between the male and the female, right, in our society. So one of the things I don't touch on in the book, but I do speak to in my next book, right? Because this book, I wrote it really as an icebreaker, to introduce myself as an author. And really the next book is where I really speak my mind,
Okay.
and one of the things I touch on is the project of the destruction of the African family. So the whole thing of, gender-based violence and how the poison that it has become in our society. Like I said earlier, we have to understand it in the context of how apartheid sowed a wedge between the vertical wedge. So they broke the African family vertically, which is between the male and the female, and horizontally, which is between the mother and father and the children, right? So the GBV is a product of the vertical wedge that was driven. Let me just flip to the opposite side and say, the reason why they did this, they know it was the opposite of what they were doing in their own society, right? So if you look at the project of Afrikaner nationalism, which is what I dwell on a lot on my book, okay? Afrikaner nationalism was born out of the idea that Afrikaners realized that we are a different people, we're coming from different parts of Europe, but we need to become one nation, okay? And what they then realized was that to make themselves a nation, because remember, the Afrikaners it's an artificial nation. It's not a natural nation. It was a created nation, right?
Okay.
So they said, okay, how do we do that? We build families, okay? And how did they do that? They introduced structures that would create and facilitate an environment of building Afrikaner families. So one of the simplest example that I talk to is rugby. They introduced the concept of rugby as a family building activity, right? So schools and clubs would create this calendar, right, of rugby tournaments where every weekend the family would be forced to spend time together, right? So if you look at, for example, in our African culture right now, if you go to a park on a holiday or whatever, or a restaurant, you'll find a group of women sitting together, a group of guys sitting together. Women sit there, men sit there, right? There's that division. It's always there. But if you look at Afrikaners, it's always the family. If you go to a caravan park, it's a family. If you go to a rugby game, it's families. If you go to a cricket game, it's families, right? So they deliberately came up with mechanisms that would facilitate family building, the strengthening of the family structure. Okay, the Dutch Reformed Church, the NG Kerks, the churches were created as means to facilitate the building and the strengthening of the Afrikaner families. And so they were briefed, the Broederbond, which was the think tank of the African nation at the time, that was one of their mandates to say that anything that we do, we need to make sure that family comes first, because they know that a nation consists of a cluster of families. And so the only thing that they had to do was to do the opposite of that on our side. So break us apart, create animosity. So there's a general animosity between the genders in our culture and in the African society. And we tend to think that it's our culture because, there was a confusion that was sown. So like I said, Afrikaner was it's an artificial nation. So even the culture, it's artificial, right? It's not a natural culture. In any case, culture is a man-made thing. Definitely. So is tradition. Yeah. So they created a culture to unite themselves and do themselves together. But they made sure that they stripped away our culture, which made sure that we are united and our families stay intact, right? So when we look at something like GBV, we have to then go back and trace the root of the animosity. The animosity really comes from the fact that the African woman feels aggrieved that the African man seems detached, right? And the African man is aggrieved that the African woman suddenly feels that she's empowered and she doesn't need him, or she just wants to use him, or she just wants to make money out of him, or whatever, Okay. So that animosity, it's coming from the fact that you don't realize that the young women, when they saw their fathers going to work in Joburg, and then somebody comes back and says, I'm your stepsister, or I have 2 children by this man, and you see your mother tolerating it, they don't realize the anger and the hurt that created in the African woman. And so a lot of African women have taken internal vows, psychological vows, that they might not be aware of, that they might not verbalize, that no man, I will never submit to any man. No, I will not be my mother, right? No man will ever tell me what to do. When I walk into a relationship, I set the terms. Whether those terms are to get money out of you, if I'm going to position myself as a slave queen, or whether that is to say that I'm not going to commit myself to you. I can have another boyfriend because I saw my mother watch my father had 10 kids outside marriage. I'm not going to be that woman too. So a lot of what South African women are doing is reacting to the pain that they saw their mothers go through, right? But when the African man sees that, they read that as antagonism, right? And then they push back. And then they say, oh, then we're not going to look, not going to take care of you. If this is how you are, oh, you are empowered, you earning all the big bucks, you the one that's in demand, so I don't have a reason to look after you. So I'm also going to look after myself. I'm also going to make sure that I just get what I want from you and actually destroy as many of you as I possibly can. So this is a product of the pain that was caused. If we can all go back and look at our fathers and understand as women that our fathers, it's not that men are trash. It's not that all men cheat. It was the culture. It was a product. It was designed by the system that African men should find themselves in a position where they were not faithful to their wives. And it was designed by the system that African men should find themselves in a situation where they are emasculated by their women. And then naturally that happens when there's a push and pull and you snap. And that is where you get then the GBV, because at a nuclear level, at a microcosm, that is how it will manifest. It will manifest as a relationship where you have a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and a girlfriend who walks in, a woman who walks into a relationship from a position of power, and a young man who comes into a relationship thinking, but my father was the one who did the things that you are doing. I'm the one who should be having power in this relationship. So gender-based violence like rape is about power.
Definitely.
When we talk about rape, that rape is about nothing but power. It's same as gender-based violence. It's about absolutely nothing but power. It's at a point where somebody feels like I've lost the psychological war with you because I've sparred with you psychologically, I've sparred with you verbally, and I've lost in both instances. Now I'm going to apply the physical force, application of my power, which is the most what do they call it in science? Like the lowest form of power is physical power.
But now I feel I hear you talking about us being, a lot of the results and the outcome of the system of apartheid. Now, my concern then becomes, I get that everything is manifesting according to design and plan of the apartheid project. However, 25 years into democracy, or 25 years plus into democracy, what do you feel are our responsibilities as the African men and women and children that want to carry our, society forward, that want to move and progress past the challenges that we are facing? Because it's one thing to always look back and reference as to where the root cause of the problem is, but then it's another thing to take a stance and say, this is how we are going to come up with the solutions, and this is the sort of transformation that we want to see in our societies. Because I get that, we've been wronged and a lot of things have gone wrong because of that wrong. But I'm just now thinking about what are some of the solutions that you see, for instance, based on your bird's eye view, that we could try and implement in our societies to see a change.
I always say, that sometimes the solutions are much easier than we think. Really, it starts with conversations like the ones we're having.
Yes.
Unfortunately, so we are all concerned with bread and butter issues. Okay, everybody wants to know. If you call a conference now, nobody wants to go to a conference about fixing the rights of apartheid. Everybody right now wants to go to a networking conference where they're going to find out how to get their next invoice.
Yes,
right?
Definitely.
Unfortunately, as much as we can be so concerned about our stomachs, it will come at a cost.
Definitely.
At some point, it takes literal effort to build a nation, to build a family. It's the same as a relationship. So we say, talk JBV, for example, or unfaithfulness or infidelity in a relationship. By the time you see infidelity, that's a symptom. It started with a small thing, which was just lack of honest communication, which is a very simple thing, and which is a skill that a lot of people don't realize that it's a costly skill. If you were to invest in your communication skill, it's a lifelong skill that we undermine, and we undermine life skills, right? I mean, think even subjects at school when it's life orientation. Okay, life orientation. Yeah,
it's a boring subject nobody wants to focus on.
We don't realize, we were speaking about emotional intelligence, emotional availability. We don't realize the cost of not taking care of everything else other than the money, right?
True. Very true.
That is why you're going to end up with men who are eating sushi on women's bodies. Okay. That is why you're going to end up with a Twitter, a masturbation Twitter MySpace. Okay. That is why you're going to end up with women, who by the age of 25 have had 10, 15 abortions.
Sure.
Right. Because nobody wants to spend time to do what the Afrikaners spend a hell lot of time
doing
on, which was we need to build this nation. Yes. How do we do it? Okay, we're going to start churches. Okay, we're going to have dominees. Dominees, when you preach for, that the Afrikaners, they went so far to strengthen the family to the point where they even made it clear, even in their divorce laws, right? It would be, an African man would know that if you divorce your woman, you leave the house, you go, you leave the woman with the house and everything and the children. The woman must not be disturbed. You are the one who wants to leave. You leave and go and start your own life, right? That's how detailed they became about and intentional they became about these things, right?
Yes.
But it took a special desire, a special will, of course, and like I say, the Buddha bond, it was like a think tank of the society, So and the government had a will. They got their will, by the way, from the Anglo-Boer War, because they had an enemy, which was the English, and they had this innate thing to want to prove themselves to the English, right? That we can govern ourselves. Yeah. So there was a will, and where there's a will, there's always a way.
Definitely.
Do we have a will to want to become a better nation, or are we a nation that simply feels that we are owed something? Apartheid owes us.
Yes.
Everybody owes us something.
That's a
so
very
at what
point,
are we going to take accountability? And the strangest thing is that, when we're talking accountability, it doesn't mean blaming yourself. It simply means doing the exercise that you're talking about to say, look, I might not like you. There's friction, but what's causing this friction? Hasn't it given you liberation in your life, Zandile? Every time you've understood why you do certain things.
It has, definitely, yes.
Or why you experience something.
Yes.
The why, for me, the why, my life is driven by the whys, the power of the why. Every time I go through something that is negative, even that is positive, but mostly when it's negative, if I go through a negative experience, my first instinct is not always, oh gosh, why me? My question is, why did this happen? How did I allow this to happen? Or why am I experiencing this? Why do I feel this way? Even if it's a feeling, I'm always on the why. We need to have a why. We need to have a craving to understand why things are the way they are in our society.
And a will to change them.
Why.
Yes.
Pardon me, Sandy?
And the will to change it. Like once we know why, we have to have a will. You were talking about a will.
Because you can't change what you don't know.
Yes,
you can't change what you don't know. That is why, Marxism was born out of an understanding that nothing is just the way it is, right? Geography is a study of understanding that nothing is just the way it is. When you see a mountain, Table Mountain, it wasn't always there. There was a process that took place for Table Mountain to be there.
Yes.
The oceans, there was a process that took place for them to be there, And so even in society, nothing is just the way it is, And that is what Marxism is. It was broader than economics. It's broader than socialism. It's about even understanding the antagonism in society between the genders, And we just want to think that things are just the way they are because of apartheid. No. But how? How did apartheid do that? Because it was a detailed project. It was a dossier that was, that was refined over time. And they benchmarked, by the way. It was based on the best studies of oppression across the world. So it was based on the best slavery models. The best exploitation models, the base racial discrimination models. So it was an epitome of oppression, apartheid, much more refined. It was like a oppression on steroids, right? Because also it came later, when the rest of the world had abandoned this, and then it just came and refined all these old concepts, and managed to disguise them and make them look nice. That is why the world took so long to catch on to the fact that there was apartheid happening in South Africa, because they had disguised it so well and couched it so well, And so if we don't take the effort to go back and unpack that, it's like when you find out you're a robot, you're going to have to find out, how was I programmed? What was I programmed to do? And we have to unpack it, and we have to give people space to be able to do that, give ourselves space to be able to do that. We have to write, we have to think, we have to talk.
Yes.
And really come from a space of engagement and truly having a strong desire to become a better nation. Because at the rate that we're going,
I love how beautifully woven God is into your stories. You talk about Mbali's experience, her salvation experience. You talk about I think in high school she went to a Christian boarding school, and you also talk about later on in her life when she has an ancestral call, and she then decides to not pursue that, but decides to follow the path of God. So in the Bible it says that we must have dominion, and rule. That's what it says in Genesis. Do you feel, in the context of you weaving in the spiritual aspect of us being a God-loving people and God-fearing people, do you think that we are being true to that mandate of taking dominion? Because if we can be subjected to the ills and the woes of a system like apartheid, come out of it, fight for liberation by all means, and attain that liberation. But post that, we are suffering the many ill effects or the collateral damages, for lack of a better word, of the system itself. So do you think that we are a people that has not really taken hold and taken the mandate of ruling and having dominion in our own societies to heart and are executing that according to what God has said we should do?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I love getting into spiritual territory, and I often have to contain myself because every interview, every chance I get to speak, I just want to go spiritual straight up, and that's why when I started to say I like to observe from the top down, what I meant by that is that I like to be spiritual. But, yes. So I always have to control myself. So to have spiritual conversations is my favorite pastime, because I believe that that's really the beginning and end of everything, yes, right? So true. The mandate, the dominion mandate, yes, it's real, right? And one of the things that I touch on in my next book, so Mbali is just an introduction of how that manifests itself at an individual level. But in my book that I'm writing now, I literally go very deep into the dominion mandate, because one of the talks, I believe, the dominion mandate was given to the African, right? I believe the dominion mandate was given to when you look at the Bible, you look at Noah, one of his sons, the African son, right? And I believe that because there's nowhere in the world where you won't find a Black person,
definitely,
right?
Yes.
So already that tells you that we have a footprint all over the world. So we had the dominion mandate, and we exercised it. And that is why you find us all over the world. So nature, allowed it to be that way, that we were able to have our footprint everywhere. So if you go to Australia, you'll find the Aborigines, the native. If you go to the Americas, you'll find the Native Americans, those are Africans. So everywhere in the world, in every part of the 7 continents, you'll find a Black person who was the original inhabitor of that place, right? So we had the mandate. So where we lost it, because we lost it somewhere. I speak about the cycles, right? The cycles. One of the things that I do in that book, I really look into how we lost the mandate, okay, or how we were robbed of the mandate, okay, and I look at the cycles of different kingdoms and how life evolves and how power shifts from one hand to the next, from one generation to the next, because it is a fact of life. Nature never leaves a vacuum, yes, right? Definitely. So we know that at some point, Africa was the greatest kingdom, and that's a fact, okay? It was the greatest kingdom. And when the white capitalists, the European and British capitalists, came into Africa in order to exploit Africa and to enslave Africans, they realized that these people, the strongest thing that they had was that mandate, the dominion mandate. So they asked themselves, how is it that these people are here? And how is it that these people are living? But one thing that they picked up and they realized with us is that we had a very strong spiritual connection. One of those was the fact that we had a monotheistic God. So when you look at Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, all of those religions, they come from they're of African origin, right? Because when you go to Europe, they were pagans. And they believed in gods, they were Greek gods, there were all sorts of gods, and so we were the A-list of spirituality, right? And so what you see in the Bible and what you read about in Judaism and in Islam is basically African context that were taken, repackaged and sold back to us as Christianity or Islam or Judaism. So what happened then is that Europe realized that, okay, in order to be able to interrupt this mandate, the first thing we have to strip them of their spiritual consciousness. We have to strip them of their culture, and not only strip it. It's just like our minerals. Okay, so remember, spirituality is as important as the gold. It's just that it's in the atmosphere, whereas the gold is in the ground. Yes. To steal spiritual secrets. it's when if somebody can know your secrets, Zandi, how you survive. It's like sometimes I can put it in a simple way to say, never let people in on your hustle. There are people who spend themselves time and ask, how does Zandi do it? How? And you might not always know that it's a secret. You might just be thinking, I just pray, I just live. You don't know that there's something that's operating right in your life. There's a force. Yes. But if I'm spiritually aware and alert, and I'm looking and I'm searching, because if you seek, you will find. Yes. If I apply myself and I can apply myself to you, I'll be able to find your secret, right? I can be able to see that, what works for Zandi? She's got this gift. When she applies this is the gift that works for her. And I can spiritually decide I'm going to take that gift from you, okay? And the one way I take that gift from you, if you don't even know that you have the gift, it's even better for me. It's even quicker for me to steal the gift from you, right? It's how Jacob and Esau did it, right? So people don't believe this thing. So Esau was oblivious of his dominion mandate. He was oblivious of the value of his being the firstborn son, right? He just thought it's just another thing. Yeah. He was just like, guys,
I'm just the firstborn.
I'm just like this. He never took it seriously.
And he never valued
another thing
it.
To him. Yes. But Jacob, he saw deeper than that. He saw that this man, he's gifted. He doesn't understand his inheritance. He doesn't understand that there's a mandate, there's a blessing upon his life. So if you don't know that there's a blessing upon your life, you automatically open room for other people to steal it from you.
Sure.
And the only way you do that, there must be an exchange. They cannot just steal it from you and, without your consent.
Give it up.
There will be a form of exchange.
You have to give it up.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And so it's the same thing that happened with us. They came here, they saw that we didn't understand the mandate that was upon us. Some of it we understood, because remember, one of the things, we never wrote down things a lot, and we kept our history orally, was because we were secretive about some of these things. But they found ways, to access our secrets. So the colonization of Africa took place first spiritually. Let's start there. They would never have been able to conquer us physically had they not conquered us spiritually. So when they took our secrets, when they took our Bibles and our scrolls and our beliefs and our God, and they took that God back to Europe and repackaged that God and watered him down and added frills and other things to our God and brought him back to us, right? And said, this is your God. And we were like, okay, but now what? No, it's still the same God, but just a little bit. And we took it. That was when we consented. And that was when we lost our power. When we lost our spiritual power, that was when we lost everything else. So to regain our power, I say that it doesn't help us to say, Christianity is a white people's thing, throw it away. And then we all want to be sangomas, right? Because that's not even half of it, okay? We can't say suits and clothes and cars and phones, they came with white people, so throw them away. So what do? We have to wear traditional clothes. When you celebrate Heritage Day, you wear traditional clothes and you think you're celebrating yourself. No. That is not even a quarter of who you are. You see, if you're an African and you understand your dominion mandate, you'll understand, number one, that Africa humanity began in Africa, that Africa is the cradle of humankind. So the first human being was made in Africa, right? So that is why the African woman gene is the only gene that you can find in every nation, right? So if you look at a black man, there's an African woman gene in there. If you look at a white woman, there's an African woman gene in there. If you look at a white man, there's an African woman gene in there. So all these other nations, all these other people, they stemmed from the black woman, right? So they are the descendants of the African, right? Sure. We are the ancestors of humanity. They are the descendants of the African. Wow. So when we claim, that is why if you read the back of my book, I call it African universalism. When we understand the universality of Africanness, when you understand that Africanness is not just about the melanin, the black skin, it's not just about the continent Africa, it's not just about what we call heritage, the artifacts and the clothes, the shwe and that. You will realize, you will begin to understand your dominion mandate. Why we have the dominion mandate? We have the dominion mandate because we are the master gene, right? So when you look at a European, when you go to Europe and you see those structures and you see those buildings, you must say, oh, well done, my child, well done, my descendants.
Come on now.
Those are your descendants, and remember, in Africa, we have a saying for that. We say, "Lifutso la fetella." The inheritance multiplies. It becomes more intense. Whatever that I inherit. So if my mother was a teacher, I'll become a professor. If I inherit that from my mother, I'll become more than her. So it is only natural that our descendants would do more than us because they descended from us. So they descended from us and descended from us with that dominion mandate. And so that is why Jesus said, yes, I'm Christ, I'm God, but you will do greater things than me.
Yes, greater works.
So everything that comes out of you does greater than you. Your children, Zandi, are going to do greater things than you. Amen. My children already, I mean, when I was young, my mom used to think I'm like, yo, this child, it's only now I realize when I'm older, my mom, she was, gobsmacked by me, some of the things I would say, some of the things I would do. And I thought I was when you're older, you start realizing our parents, they think so highly of us.
That's true.
Because they marvel at this creation that, my God, this daughter, she's my child, she does this, but our children, they are triple, 10 times that.
Yes.
Our children are so eloquent, they're so articulate, they're so intricate, they're so they just grab things like this, right?
Yeah.
They are your descendants. So every time the gene, so that is what the gene does. Every time the gene, it mutates, right? It becomes better and better and better. And so even with them, I'm not saying they're better than us. I'm just saying that they evolved from us. And so they are the evolved version of ourselves, but we are their ancestors, and they owe whatever it is that they think they have and that they think they are to us. If it were not for us, they would not be there.
Okay, sure, Neno. You and I think can carry on, and this discussion is so rich, so layered, so multifaceted that I definitely need to bring you back. And we can talk about your upcoming book, because I feel like there are so many gems and so many potent points that we can extract from what you have in store for us. But for today, I just want to thank you. This has been such an insightful conversation, such a rich discussion. Thank you for unpacking so many of the elements of your book. I feel like, we didn't even get to like the heart and the meat of some of the things that you still discuss in Not Great But Alive. But thank you so much for indulging us, for giving us your great and amazing insight.
Yes, thank you so much. Please, the book is available. If you'd like a copy, you can contact me on 082-781-5385, and I'm available to drop it off, meet up, have a coffee, discuss, chat, and also online. It's available on Amazon.com.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure having you. Have a good one. We are going to be signing off after the break. Please stay tuned.
Zoe Life Radio, the abundant life experience. Approaching His presence with praise and worship.
We all face situations where the odds are against us.
Zoe Life Radio, the abundant life experience.
Welcome back. And sure, what a insightful session that we've just had with Nano. She had so much and to tell us, as well as so much that I myself will be chewing on and re-looking at her book and rediscovering some of the points that she has masked so beautifully under plot and storylines, but actually they are a manifestation of the issues that we are confronting as a country, of the challenges that the youth and especially the black child is confronted with by virtue of the history that we come from. But thank you so much for tuning in for this week. Next week we'll be having another exciting author. I hope you'll be looking forward to that. But for this week, have a fruitful week until we catch each other again next week, and God bless you.